What if we ask all children, who are you? Who are you at the core? Instead of what do you want to be, who are you? And I think if we ask children that question, children are so creative and so innovative and so instinctive. I think they would come up with the vocabulary to actually describe who they are. Something that us adults are not able to do.
Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. This is your host Yoshino. You are tuning in to Artist Decoded. My guest today is multimedia artist Shantell Martin, and you might be familiar with her work with Kendrick Lamar at Art Basel, or the large-scale pieces that she did in collaboration with the New York City Ballet. And I was really interested in bringing her onto the podcast to explore how she taps into her flow. And there are many videos of her online where she does live drawings, including a TED Talk with her. And in this specific TED Talk, she repeats the phrase, "It works because there's a good intention behind what I'm doing." It works because there's a good intention behind what I'm doing. And these various phrases or sayings or affirmations, if you will, in her work really intrigued me because they seem to create constant reminders for herself. These sayings are sprinkled throughout her work and her process, and another repeating affirmation in her work was this large-scale video installation that she did for the World Trade Center. The installation was over 4 stories tall and repeated the words, "Who are you?" The work intentionally plants questions for viewers to reflect upon and to consider as they pass through the center, whether heading to work or on their way home. Her work is deep, it's meditative, and at the same time, it's very playful. And speaking of playfulness, she also likes to experiment with various other mediums outside of drawing. Recently, she choreographed a piece in collaboration with the Boston Ballet. The overarching project is entitled Choreograph Her. Her project is called Kites within that dance performance, and it will be on display at the Boston Ballet between March 3rd through the 13th. You can purchase tickets to this event on their website, bostonballet.org. This podcast is full of exploration, and I really appreciated Shantell for coming onto this podcast, and I hope you all enjoy it. But before we begin, please go to our iTunes page and leave us a review there. It helps reviewers like yourself to hear about the podcast. Also, Spotify just created this new rating system. So if you go on there and you click that little 5-star review, that would really help for viewers like yourself to hear about this. So here it is, without further ado, my conversation with Shantell Martin. Hope you enjoy it. Yeah, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Do you have like an introduction you like to do, or how do you usually kick these things off?
Generally, I go pretty off the cuff, but you know, I really wanted to start off this podcast with a passage from the Tao Te Ching from Lao Tzu. And do you mind if I read it?
No, not at all. But I guess for people who don't know what that is, what is that?
The Tao Te Ching is a book, the Book of the Tao, from Lao Tzu, who is a philosopher, a Taoist philosopher. And so whenever people refer to like the teachings of the Tao, generally people point to this specific book by Lao Tzu.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So let me just read this passage, and I specifically picked this for you because I thought it really resonated, especially when I was doing research on you for this pod. The master keeps her mind always at one with the Tao. That is what gives her her radiance. The Tao is ungraspable. How can her mind be at one with it? Because she does not cling to ideas. The Tao is dark and unfathomable. How can it make her radiant? Because she lets it. Since before time and space were, the Tao is. It is beyond is and is not. How do I know it is true? I look inside myself and see. And so I pick this specific passage because to me, you and your work tap into these childlike sensibilities of expression, wonder, amazement, and presence. And I believe that these are traits that a lot of people in a capitalistic and individualistic society get lost to. And there's this unadulterated freedom to the way that you work. And I was wondering if you can pinpoint what led you to that, and beyond that, what keeps you present with those sensibilities.
Yeah. And, thank you for the quote. I think when I was listening to that, the first things that kind of came to mind is like, what's reality, and, reality that's constructed, and the social societal systems that are constructed outside of us. And, then that balance with like what's inside of us. I think to answer your question, I am where I am and I create what I create because of where I've come from. And, what I mean by that is that, I think like for many of us, I feel like I came from a place where I didn't have agency of myself or my environment or my future or my goals or my dreams. I wasn't able to imagine kind of futures or ideas or concepts of where I could imagine myself in the future. And so, like all of us, I drew as a child, I wrote as a child, used that as a tool to extract the inside out. I really don't know how I would have got through a lot of my earlier years if I didn't have this outlet of being able to pick up a pen and write and draw and get these things out. And I didn't know that that was art at the time, but it gave me that balance and it gave me that peace. The work that I was creating then was very, very dark, but it gave me that outlet to deal with like just really tough emotions at that age when you don't really have any other way of dealing with it, or you don't even know if those emotions are good or bad, because, for myself, there wasn't really any guidance there. And, if I was just to kind of now look at my path from that kind of era to now, it's moving away from this kind of lost, dark, kind of insecure, unimaginative place to where I am now. And so essentially it's been this artist or this individual's journey, or my journey, from a very dark place to a very light place. And not to say that light is absent of darkness or light is absence of any of those items, but it means that I've moved into a place where, now my work is very confident and it does feel free and it does feel playful and it does feel whimsical, because the way that I'm approaching it is with good intention, and I'm approaching it in a fun and free but positive and confident way. And I think that comes out in the work. I'm not trying to be anyone else. I'm trying to be myself. I'm trying to be highly present and aware of creating the work. And, I also just try and have fun when I'm doing it. And so, I think sometimes with art, we try to justify it in the sense of it being dark and deep and over meaningful. But I feel like you can get those things, but also by being open and vulnerable and light and giving. And so, I think everything just comes down to that balance. But I'm so grateful for being able to discover this tool that we all have access to and be able to continuously utilize that throughout my life as an individual and as a creative person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, on another podcast, you were talking about how when we're kids, most teachers or people around you are asking you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right. And, I think about that a lot in terms of doing this podcast and interviewing people, and just kind of in life in general, how there's a lot of weight to that sort of question, because aren't we already someone, right? Like, aren't we, so it's like, what the question is kind of loaded. It's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's like, well, I'm me, and maybe these mediums, it could be outside of art, right? It could be outside of a sort of traditional artistic medium, or, but I think about, how do I step deeper inside of myself? And that's also why I brought up the Tao, because the Tao teaches us to be a lot more fluid with ourselves, and to let go of our identity, and to be more open.
Yeah. And, I think with that question of, when we ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? I think that's in a way, it's a very privileged question, to imagine that your child can be all different types of things that they imagine. There's many children that are not given that question because there aren't any real options based in front of them, just based on where they're coming from, or where their family's from, or the society or structure that they're living in. But at the same time, as you touched on, I think that question is so limiting, because I think it really just throws off the humanity's goals. And what I mean by that, to go a little bit kind of further into it, what if we ask all children, who are you? Who are you at the core? Instead of what do you want to be, who are you? And I think if we ask children that question, children are so creative and so innovative and so instinctive. I think they would come up with the vocabulary to actually describe who they are. Something that us adults are not able to do. You ask most adults, tell me who you are, without saying what you do or where you're from or the roles that you play in your life. Who are you at the core? And we don't have the vocabulary or even really the emotions to articulate that or to describe that. And I think if we direct that question at children who haven't been, kind of convinced that they need all of these superficial consumerism things and be looked at a certain type of person in society and etc. If we get to children before all of that baggage is put on them, they might actually come up with the vocabulary that describes who we are as humans, as people, as individuals. And I think when we put these words into society, those words will be a driving force to give us purpose and to also guide us to what actually is important. Because now if you're teaching your kids, like, what do you want to be? What do you want to be? What do you want to be? They're going to come up with these things that are associated with things. I want to be a doctor because doctors have what? They have accolades and perhaps money and perhaps this, or, and I think just pivoting that question and coming up with that vocabulary will give us all guidance to really home in on our priorities as a species and as individuals as well.
Yeah. I'm curious. So who would you say that you are at your core? Like when that question comes up for you, because I also like that in your process, you ask yourself a lot of questions, right? And so from my understanding, as you ask yourself these questions, you can call it affirmations. I know that you like to call them sayings and not mantras, from what I've gathered from listening to you speak before. But what would you say is your core?
It's a good question. And in a way, the work that I create is like a mirror. I'm reflecting those questions out to the world to see if I can gather fragments of answers that resonate or relate to me. In general, I would say I'm open, I'm giving, I'm a curious, innovative, curious, doubly curious individual. But like I said, I feel like we just have a real lack of vocabulary to really articulate that. But as you said, I like to put these sayings or these seeds in the form of questions out into the world so that when I do get some answers back, when you hear something that feels true to you, you know it when you hear it. And I feel like my work in a way is like a mirror that is reflecting those questions out to the world in hope of resonating with some of the answers that I might get back.
Yeah. And I really like that, in your TED Talk, I really like that there was this moment in there where you said it works because there's good intention behind what I'm doing. And then you repeated that over and over. It works because there's good intention behind what I'm doing. And, there's something powerful about repeating a specific phrase over and over again. And like, I'm curious what you mean by that in terms of like a good intention. And I was wondering, a second part to that question is, can you name a time when you lost that good intention?
It's interesting because I think when I'm speaking, I'm performing, and when I'm performing, I'm drawing. And just like my drawing, there's a repetition of lines, of words and characters. And so often when I do give a talk or a presentation, you'll find that I'll repeat things. And it's not because I think in one instance, I'm trying to home in on that and see how it feels inside of me. But also the talk or the presentation that I'm giving also feels like a drawing. And just like my drawing, there are elements that are repetitive. And I think sometimes we need to see things or hear things or feel things kind of subsequently a few times in a row for it really to like sink in. And so that's something I do there. But what I've noticed with drawing, drawing is really interesting because you can imagine a drawing and it doesn't exist, but you can actually pick up a pen and then make a drawing, and then now it exists. And so in a sense, you pulled something that could be imaginative or imagine into a place that now exists where we all can see it. And so for it to be seen and it to feel like it should have always been there, the intention behind it needs to be good. And so, for example, if I'm walking up to a wall that's 200 feet wide and I'm just going to draw, I don't do a sketch beforehand. I don't have a plan beforehand. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know how I do what I do. I just pick up a pen. And what I've noticed, actually, someone pointed this out to me. They say, "Oh, Shantell, do you realize that before you start a mural, you pace up and down, you'll pace up and down that wall?" And someone said to me, what you're likely doing is measuring that space with your body. And that's really interesting because for someone that doesn't plan their composition or plan what they're doing, I am relying on other things, and I'm relying on good intention, which is going at it in a way that is calm, where I'm not trying to be insecure, where I'm not hesitating, I'm not being worried about it. I'm just being quite neutral about what I'm about to do. And then on the other hand, it's quite practical, where I pick up the pen and now it's like a dance of just focusing as you would if you were dancing, focusing on just trying to get everything super smooth and consistent and flowing. And so my focus is on, often it's just how is the ink coming out of the pen, or how is this, spray or paint coming out of a spray can? Is it clean? Is it smooth? Is it crisp? Am I moving my body efficiently so that, I can draw on this 200-foot wall, which is, it's a big feat within itself. And so, I think the function there for me in a way is efficiency and intention. Bad intention might be, I don't care what I'm doing. Like, I'm not liking what I'm doing. Like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm trying to be someone else as I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Good intention is, hey, let me just dance. Let me just be consistent. Let me move my body. Let me focus on this ink coming out of this pen, and let the pen tell me where to go, and I'll just follow. And I think so in a way, just, that's a very long way of just saying that good intention is confidence in yourself, but it's also being able to like sit back and let your body do the work, and you can kind of observe that as a from the back seat.
Well, speaking of just observations in general, I think that's also the power of being human, first of all. But since we're talking about art, the greatest power of being an artist is to utilize your observations for your own practice. And I'm just curious what you've observed from other people that may have lost their way, because it seems like you're very in touch with yourself and your emotions and your stream of consciousness. And I'm sure there are times when you do second guess yourself, but it seems like you've developed, it's kind of like running, right? Like the first time that you run, it's going to kind of suck, right? But then after you've run continually and work out continually, you just start, it becomes second nature in a way, right? And so you step deeper inside of yourself, as a sort of metaphor. And I'm curious, maybe like, what advice do you have for people that may have lost their way? What are some things that you do on a daily basis that they can step deeper inside of themselves?
Yeah, I think firstly, as time goes on, I never really liked the word, or I'm beginning not to like the word artist, because just to put that out there, I feel like
I'm going to have to change the podcast, the title, because of this conversation.
You can pull it in there. But, it's funny, as an artist, I'll go and give a presentation, or I'm like lecturing or being a scholar at MIT or something. And, people will be like, oh, so surprised that you're able to, present or talk or teach because you're an artist. And so I think for some reason in kind of modern day society, we put these limitations on artists, and then we're surprised when they do things out of a realm that we unexpect them to be or to do. And so, I think sometimes words can over time become limiting. And so, as artists and creatives, like, we didn't make these boxes, so therefore we shouldn't put ourselves in them, or it should be continuously our job to kind of try and break those walls down from these boxes. But, to answer the bigger question, I don't think there's anything I actually do every single day. I've always found being like super consistent in that sense of having a daily or even a weekly routine has always been a struggle for me. And a struggle because I feel like that's something I should be doing. I should be drawing every day, and I should be doing these other types of things every day because I'm an artist and that's what artists do. But I think, my advice would be is to figure out what you would do individually, like what fits you. Because, I think the baggage of thinking or believing what we should be doing or how we should be doing it or how many times we should be doing it can be limiting within itself. But that said, consistency is so important, but consistency doesn't have to be daily or weekly. It could be monthly, it could be yearly, it could be quarterly, it could be as you ever, whenever you get that urge, just do it, make that time or that space to do it. For me, I'm constantly, I'm very good with a list. If something's on the list, it gets done. And if it's not, it doesn't. If it doesn't make it to the list, maybe it's not important enough to me to make it to the list. But, and I think that's one of the fun things about not having kind of a regimented job, even though like a 9 to 5 looks very different today. But in general, I get to wake up and, kind of let my day be dictated in the way that I want to. And so, I would say for anyone that is, in that place where you're kind of stuck, like pick up a pen. I've always found that if I'm in a mood that is kind of like off or unbalanced or a little bit dark or moody or, I feel a little bit depressed or whatever, I've always found if I pick up a pen and I just start drawing, that suddenly I feel better. Sometimes just that action of picking up a pen, it takes us a lot to get there. But I feel like whenever I just do that very simple exercise of like, oh, I'm going to pick up a pen, I'm going to draw, I'm not going to overthink it, I'm just going to make some lines. And then before you know it, like, oh, I do feel slightly better. So I'm going to just do this like whenever I can, and I think just implementing those little life hacks, or even just like, hey, like I sleep really late every night. Why don't I just try and go to bed a little bit earlier every single night until I'm actually getting 8 or 9 hours of sleep and see how that affects me. And so I think holistically, there's just, with regards to your sleeping routines or your eating routines, or those are things that actually can have such a dramatic impact in your life overall, and, kind of really drive you to feel like you're creative and feel like you want to do things. And then when you have those urges, then just do it, make that space and make that time. And that can just be like 1 minute drawing on a notebook while you're on the phone with someone. It doesn't have to be a whole orchestrated kind of exercise.
Do you ever think about the things that you do as experimentations? And I'll clarify a little bit. So, sometimes I think of things personally as experimentations because it takes a lot of the weight off of having some sort of final product or final outcome. And then it's personally gives myself a better approach to just being like, you know what, I'm going to show up and I'm just going to try to flow with it or try to do it. And I think it alleviates some pressure, but I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah. I think whatever works for you, it's like experimenting, expressions. I also find with drawing, I'm going to keep coming back to drawing because I feel like we should all be doing it. But, I've noticed with drawing, if you draw on a mobile app or on a tablet, you take it less seriously. Therefore, there's less of a barrier to it. And I think that's because you're not leaving something physical behind in that sense of like there's a piece of paper or a notebook page that kind of can potentially haunt you. And with a tablet or a mobile phone, you can just undo and press back. And I think that kind of alleviates like some of that hesitation. And so I think, like for all of us, we often have to trick ourselves initially into doing these things. I like learning stuff. So, I'm like, okay, so drawing feels like a little bit of a job right now. So maybe I'm going to play music. Okay. So now music feels like I'm doing it a bit too much and I still feel like I need a creative outlet. Maybe I'll learn a new computer software, or maybe I'll read a book, or maybe I'll go for a walk. And so I think we always kind of need these creative outlets that feel like they're a relief or a change or an experiment or an expression from our normal daily life. And, the medium of that can change as well. You don't have to like pick something and then stick at it. You can, kind of just try different things and incorporate those into your day or into your week.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that you said that because that's kind of what I was thinking when I was watching that video for Choreograph Her and your project Kites with the Boston Ballet. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are stepping into a different medium.
Yeah. I love that. And I've always done that. And that's when it comes back to the, like the baggage that we give words, so what does a different medium really mean? Like, aren't artists always experimenting and trying different mediums? Or doesn't the word of artist allow us or give us permission to do that? And then actually when you look at it, it's like, well, not really, because we put these boxes around artists and what genre or what medium or what industry that they should be working in or what they could work in. And I've always kind of said that, as long as you bring your full self to what you're doing, it will look like you, it will feel like you, it will sound like you, it will move like you. And so as an artist that has a style and a fingerprint and an identity, I can create in any different medium or industry that I like because I'm going to bring my full self to it. There might be a little bit of a learning curve to have all the right tools to get there. But if I want to design a building, it's going to look like me. If I want to design furniture, it's going to feel like me. It's going to look like me. If I want to choreograph a ballet, it's going to move like me. If I want to make music, it's going to sound like me because it's coming from my full and true self. I think that only doesn't work when you're trying to be someone else. Or if I'm like, I've never choreographed a ballet before, what would a choreographer do? And I'm like, no, like, what would I do? And now I have this opportunity to do that thing. And so for me, I've always kind of excelled in the uncomfortableness of not knowing and just showing up and doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important thing to state in terms of speaking about just the idea of mediums in general, because at the end of the day, it's really just expression, right?
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, you know, kind of like the pitfalls of, I'm just going to use commercialization, for instance, or like people that direct for an advertising for commercials. Generally, the way those things go is that they want you to have some sort of mood board, and a mood board, or even like with music videos too, right? And that is like the communication tool to be able to say what your vision is. But in order to construct that vision, and you know, there's people who do it differently. Like, you know, if a director also draws, right, and can draw out their whole vision. But I think what I've observed in general, it's taking other people's images, like, you know, scouring the internet for images and then putting it together to create your version of that, right? And so that immediately takes out this idea of personal expression. And by that, you're not really expressing something that is necessarily you.
Yeah.
You know, because you're drawing from other people's images. So, I mean, I hate to like kind of like overly intellectualize this, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is just this idea of sinking deeper into yourself and really questioning these things. You know, questioning the motivation behind it, questioning your motivations. And that's what really drew me to your work just in general. And I want to talk about also the importance of conversations, the project you did with Nifty Gateway, the NFT project. And this saying that you said, you are where you are meant to be. And I think you said this is something that you say to yourself a lot. Is that correct?
Yeah, I used to say it less so often now, but I've always had, and also less so often now, but I've always had quite a fear of flying. And I think that's how I was able to get on planes for like the last 20 years, is that I would repeat this saying, you know, you're where you're meant to be, you're where you're meant to be. You know, you're in the right place at the right time. And, you know, I've flown so much in the past that, you know, I've probably said this like thousands and thousands of times over and over again in my mind. But, you know, now it's kind of taken a different shape as I'm not really on planes that often. I still find myself saying it every now and then to myself. And, you know, I think it's just, I think it gives you permission just to be in the moment and just like go with it and let your actions and thinking just be inspired by that moment instead of thinking that you need to get out of it. So it's been super helpful for me.
I like that.
Yeah. And, you know, when I find things that are helpful for me, they're usually helpful for others. And so, you know, I like to share them. And, you know, I think in general, that whole collection, you know, the body of work was called The Importance of Conversation. And it was actually kind of a part two from an initial project that was called The Importance of Process. And these are two things that have been really important within my work. You know, primarily I see the process as being the work. It's not really about the end result. And so I've always kind of wanted to shine a light on the process, which, you know, doesn't get as much kind of accolade in a way, but you've seen that through, you know, if I'm creating work, I never want it to just show up in a space. I want people to see the work being created so that they actually become a part of it. Because ultimately for me, you know, the part or the point of being an artist is so that you can make and share and that you can have creative connections and experiences. And the best place to do that is in the work when it's happening. And, you know, kind of as an extension to that, you know, I created this series called The Importance of Conversation. And, you know, I noticed, especially within this kind of like new digital revolution age that we're in, I'm not having as many meaningful conversations as I used to, or I feel like even with myself, you get very busy and you wake up and you just go at it. And, I wanted to create a collection which, was a reminder to have those conversations with yourself, to see conversations as being important with yourself or with others, to take that time, to make that space. And then, I put out a series of works that kind of spoke to some kind of positive starting points to do that. And, one of them is called Is It Real? Another one's called Make and Share. And these are almost like starting points of different types of conversations. So, I think it's really nice recently to be able to make work around a theme, which is still an extension of work I've been creating, but, you get to kind of tie it up a little bit and put a message out there. And so I think that's also something about my work. It's, I think people kind of a lot of creatives will create bodies of work. And I've been mostly kind of almost creating a tale of work. There's no real beginning and end, but there's a constant waves of questions and seeds and phrases and things that meet me where I'm at that time.
And can we go a bit deeper into that? So like when you're talking about those two phrases, is it real and make and share, why specifically did you choose those two?
I've always thought about this question and whenever I meet someone that's like highly educated and way smarter than me, I'll ask them this question, like, does progress really exist? Or is it just the scenery that changes? And like this question, like for years and years and years, I love to ask people it because, you always hear these same troubles or issues of people not knowing how to be parents, or children not getting along with their children, or people not being able to have real relationships, or, it seems like we're having these same human struggles that have been going on forever and ever and ever and ever, with regards to parenting and relationships and communities. And so it's amazing that, people have been around forever, but we still don't have the answers to those questions. And so, I often think that, technology evolves and, architecture changes and, science makes revelations, but at the core of it, we're still left with those same problems or family dynamics or dramas. So is it real? Like, does progress exist? Like, or is it literally the scenery that's updated and we're living out on repetition these core struggles of humanity and parenting and relationships and communities. And so I like to put those questions out there in other forms. So instead of this being a conversation with a very smart, educated friend, I'm making an NFT that particular one also came with a print so that, people could maybe put that up and in a way ask themselves that question or see that question. But that's ultimately where that came from or comes from.
I like that. Yeah. It's kind of meta in a way too, posing the question, is it real? And also relating that to NFTs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I like that a lot. But, something that I think about regarding technological innovations is that the technology changes, but I believe that human psychology remains the same. And I also think of just that idea, is it real? And then so I think about these narratives that we build in our heads about a certain situation or a certain person, whether they like us or not, and does it even matter, and just these narratives that we build inside our heads, even about ourselves, right? And it's like, is it real? Or am I just thinking that it's real and it's creating this limited belief, which, since we're talking about drawing in your work, I mean, that's why I find to be really freeing about the way that you express, And I'm sure there are times when you second guess yourself, but it seems like you just developed this resilience almost in a way, to where you can just tap into it. And I think that's very rare, and I think that's what attracts a lot of people to your work.
I think, the biggest struggle that I have often with my work or my approach to things is, I do catch myself asking, what's the point? You show up, you make the work, you do what you feel like you should be doing. You're in the right place at the right time. You're making all of this stuff, but then at some point you die. So what's the point? And I think, as creative people, we often get in our own heads and overthink these things, or I think these things should be thought about, and that's kind of the struggle that I have often, like just showing up and being confident and doing that thing and like feeling like I have permission to do that, no problem. Every now and then thinking, what's the point in doing that? Then I have to call someone and be like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And, then that's why I'll end up making a video that says, what's the point in making art? It's to make and share. And so when you see kind of like messaging or videos or artworks like that pop up or out into the world, it's kind of me trying to, give myself some, I don't know what the right word is, but some
like an affirmation.
Yeah. Some sense of affirmation or purpose in what I'm doing so that I can continue to do what I do. Because if you don't find an answer to that question, you can just stop altogether, because then you might say, well, there is no point. But, that's not happened yet, because I always feel like there is a point, and that point is to make and to share and to create these creative connections and to empower the freedom of creativity and to be open and to be kind and to explore and to enjoy it and to feel it and to let it evolve when it wants to evolve. But essentially, like, that is the point, and that is the struggle, and that is the triumph, kind of all in one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really good to state too, because there will be those moments of existential dread and those moments of having the dark night of the soul. And I think it's good to know, from your perspective too, and for people listening out there, that these affirmations are, they help you in a lot of ways, right? I mean, and a lot of the times there's authors, maybe not a nonfiction writer, for instance, that they're just trying to answer their own questions. And then they're creating this book, right? And so I don't know. It's just, it's interesting to think about that too. It's like, well, what is the point? Like, what's the point of doing this podcast, right? What's the point of having this conversation?
Yeah.
Right. But I think that there is a point, and kind of, going off of what you're saying, that we're making this, right? We're making this conversation, we're sharing it with an audience, and then hopefully they'll feel some sort of sense of comfort, or maybe they won't feel so lost in this world. And maybe also by us sharing this conversation, we too feel less lost in this world, depending on the type of connection and type of conversation you have with your fellow peers. And, so I think about that a lot too. And just this sort of like stepping deeper inside of yourself, and constantly being present with that. There's so many distractions out there, and it's like, how do you tune those out?
Yeah, completely. And, I would say, if you are listening to this right now, how did you get here? And you got here because you are in the right place at the right time, and you're meant to be listening to this. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
What you need to do with that, we're not going to tell you, but, there's just something kind of so universally kind of magical about that, and how we all get to a place. And that is the place that we're meant to be. I like to be kind of more practical in what I'm doing, but at the same time, like, those are things that I believe as well.
What do you mean in terms of the practicality?
I think sometimes those, when you say you're in the right place at the right time, or you're meant to be here, like, it can sound a little bit like woo-woo or spiritual.
Or
but I
like
think
overly romantic.
yeah, and
Yeah.
but not to say there's anything wrong with that, but I'm just saying that typically my approach is very practical. But I think there is a spirituality like in that practicality as well. There is a balance in that approach, and so I might not be trying to be of spiritual or overtly kind of any of that, but I think when you are creative and focused and just kind of just allowing it to be what it should be, I think those words or kind of themes play a role in it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I was curious too, like I know you've talked about this on other podcasts, but when you left the UK to go to Japan, I'm curious what sort of realizations you came across in yourself during that time period.
Yeah, it's so hard to think back now because, I was such a different person when I moved from the UK to Japan. This was like 2003. I just finished art school. I realized I would never get a job doing art because, at that time in England, perhaps still now, it's all pretty much nepotism. And also I came from a family where I never even knew anyone that ever did that. So, there wasn't a model that I could see. And, then I moved to Japan, and initially I'm living in the countryside and there's no foreigners there, and I'm teaching English, and it's the first time I've ever lived alone or had a full-time job, and first time I've been in a country, or I'm living in a country where I don't know what I'm eating and I can't speak the language, and, I feel completely isolated and lost. But also the first time I realized that no one was projecting on me who I should be or what I should be. And so I think, that version of me, that version of Shantell that went to Japan, went there completely lost. But there is a freedom in being lost, in the sense that you get to discover and find yourself. And it definitely took a while, but, it is funny to think back, but I do have memories of, thinking, wow, why should I start drawing again? So many people can draw. What's the point in me starting? Because so many people do it way better than me. So why should I even start? And so, I had all these kind of barriers or blockages or even excuses to be creative. And I think, sometimes that's a comfortable place to be, because then you've given yourself excuses not to even try. I was really grateful in the sense that I discovered, kind of reluctantly, but I discovered meditation there. And, that really, the revelation that I had through meditation or meditating in Japan is that I had dialed down or numbed most of my senses, if not all of them, and I found that out through doing a 10-day, silent retreat, 10-day silent meditation retreat. On day 8, I realized that suddenly my hearing got better. And then when I left, I have this vivid memory of kind of leaving the retreat, getting back to Tokyo, walking across the street, and I could feel something in my chest. And I was like, whoa, what is that? And then I realized it was my heart beating. And then I realized I'd never, ever, ever in my whole life felt my heartbeat in my chest, because I pretty much dialed down and my whole body so that I was kind of numb to myself. And I think sometimes just to survive out in the world, we dial things down, and we're doing that kind of physically and mentally and spiritually and in other ways. And so I've been very fortunate that I found these kind of keys to kind of unlock some of these, I guess, gates or barriers that I've built up for protection over the years. And so, just to kind of cut that short in a sense, but that Shantell of moving to Japan and not having a career and completely doubting myself and not feeling that I should even start something because so many people already do it, not having, any clear models of what people can do. like, it's kind of bizarre now that like I have the life and career, and, you know, kind of all of the boxes that I've checked off since then. Like, I feel like it's such a crazy leap, and a completely different person, to who I was then.
Yeah. And imagine stepping back inside of that person before, and if you didn't make, like, if you made the decision to not draw, and you were telling yourself, and you listened to that, right? You listened to that little demon on your shoulder that said, you're not good enough, you shouldn't draw, you know, other people have drawn before, and what can I add to the conversation? Or, you know, and like, and you're not in control to an extent, right? It's like, you're not necessarily in control of the way people will perceive your work, right? So it's like, that's kind of the chance that everyone takes, right? But then you think, I don't know, I think about also this Taoist sort of parable of that they kind of liken success and failure to being one and the same. And I think the reason for that is because it takes out, or it examines our motivations for things, right? Like, if you reach success with the wrong motivations, like, what does that look like? It's just like failure, right? And so, like, I don't know, it's really hard to distill a lot of these things, right? And I think a lot of people come to think about, oh, like, you know, how can I find the answers, or what are the answers? And I know I'm guilty of this myself, trying to find the answers outside of myself, but I think the answers already reside in yourself.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because when I eventually did start drawing, no one saw it. You know, I drew with a 0.05 pen, which is like the finest pen that you can get, or pretty much. And so I would have to get so close to the paper when I was drawing, because I was using like the thinnest pen on the planet. And so the drawings that I would create were like very, very intimate, very diaristic, very detailed.
Yeah.
Way more realistic to what I'm creating now. And I never showed them. And I drew like that probably for a couple of years. And, you know, I think there was something rewarding about that. Like, I really got to know myself and got to explore the world and got to see things through my own eyes by creating these very detailed drawings. And, you know, then kind of coincidentally or accidentally, I ended up then taking that to a live environment and drawing live for the first time in Japan, and, you know, drawing live under a projector that then projected those drawings very large. And, you know, I got really addicted to the experience of drawing live with an audience, because what I realized it did is it made everything, all of these crazy thoughts that you have, all of these insecurities, all of this, like, why should I even begin? All of these, like, hesitations, they completely went away, because it's like, you don't have time. Like, when you're drawing live with an audience, you only have time to create and do the thing. And, you know, you don't have time. I often say, you know, you don't have time to be anyone else when you're creating live. And it's the most honest place that you can be. And I think in a way, that's why I'm really, like I said, I got addicted to that feeling of being in the moment, being present, not having time to be insecure, not having time to hesitate, not having time to be anyone else, not having time to let all those ideas or thoughts or kind of demons come into your head, so to speak, just to do it. And that's so rewarding. And I've really tried to bring that way of creating and that process into all aspects of my life, be it choreographing, be it playing music, be it, you know, collaborating, be it doing workshops. You know, there's some finite kind of structure or initial foundation, but then I'm bringing in the ability to, like, think intuitively and spontaneously in a live environment.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Yeah. And I mean, I think, you know, just going back to whether we're aware of it or not, but this sort of like saying comes up recently a lot for me is it's happening for you, not to you. So that's why I was saying, like, whether you're aware of it or not at the time, it's just interesting how when we challenge our perspectives and, going back to what you're saying, is it real? Right?
Yeah.
What is real, right? Are these things I'm thinking about myself, are they real, or are they something I fabricated?
Yeah. And like now, like I think that also in the aspect of like I draw for a living. Like that's so bizarre. Like that's weird.
It's awesome.
But it's strange, because it's like, wow, like, and it's funny because like I even remember like when I became a VJ in Japan, and I ended up being like top 10 VJ in the world at some point. And my friends in London were like, only you could pull that off, Shantell. And like, and I feel like it's in that same place now of like, I come from a family where no one's even finished high school, let alone like being a top 10 VJ in the world, or like, being an artist that is now in museums or institutions or making a ballet, like, you can't make that up. Like, and that's, it's interesting just to think if I went back and said to little Shantell, like, hey, you're going to do all these things. Little Shantell didn't even know what those things were, let alone that I could even do them. So, I think often I ask myself, is it real on a different level as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think something about that being very open to the possibilities of something else I've been thinking about is this perpetual sort of existence of knowing and not knowing. It's like we think we know, but there's actually so many possibilities of things that we could become if we let go of the things that we think we know too.
Yeah. Well, they say if you know, you don't know.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for doing this. I know we're approaching the time limit right now, but I really appreciate you for coming on board and sharing your thoughts with me and everyone that listens to Artists Decoded.
Yeah, and I hope that for anyone listening right now, like look around. Like, is there a pen around you? Do you have a marker around you? Do you have a pencil around you? Like, what could you draw on? What could you write on? And kind of like set yourself up for success and like put those things out in front of you, or by the bed or by the door, or, or something. It's just, like I said, we have to trick ourselves into bringing in these activities or expressions into our life that are actually really good for us. And I think once you get over that little hurdle, there's only benefit to all of us in doing them.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's great. Well, cool. Thanks for doing this.
No, super fun. That went like so quickly. So,
yeah.
Thanks for being creative and using your voice to, bring people together and put out, such great stories with different creatives, and, keep doing your thing, and I hope to meet you in person at some point.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. Yeah. You too. Keep doing you.
There you go. We brought it back to you. You.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, enjoy the rest of your day.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. Music for the podcast is by Rarebit, aka Justin Dosher Hopkins. YouTube and creative support is by Tyler Scully. Thanks so much for tuning in. See you next time.